My name is Yasmine Taan, and I have with me today Rana Salam. Rana lives in between Miami, Beirut, and London. She is known as the enfant terrible of the Beiruti art and design scene, or even the queen of Arab pop. Rana runs her own design studio specializing in branding. She worked with clients like Harvey Nichols, Art Dubai, Liberty of London, the V&A in London, Paul Smith, and Comptoir Libanais, to name just a few. Hi, Rana.
هاي أهلين كيفك؟
إيه حبيت العربي كمان.
Hey, I have to keep in touch with that. بعد ما صرت أمريكانية still I'm all the way in Miami, as you know. We're doing this Miami via Beirut.
I have to say we miss you in Beirut, Rana, dearly.
حبيبتي إيه أنا كمان. I was just telling you earlier, I'm very very homesick. So ما بدي العالم تفكر إنه تركت لبنان وخلص وما أعرف. بالعكس I'm exporting my culture and my mission is not completed. So I'm here to continue that mission. مش لأنه تركت وهربت.
لا, definitely not. I hope not. لأنه we have 30 minutes of discussion about how you're exporting or how you intend to continue exporting your culture beyond the borders, the Lebanese borders. But let's start by when and why you've decided to become a designer.
A designer, well, I mean, as you know, from my parents, my father obviously is an architect, as you know that, and my mother was very much a catalyst in all of this because she used to harness all of my talent as a young kid. So at the age of 13, being surrounded by parents that are very cultured and fathers that's an architect, grew up in a house that was like full of design and eclecticness and all of that. And at 13, I suddenly wanted to do something that was very artistic and that also made money. So I think design was maybe the answer to that. I didn't really know what was design, but I was very attracted to that world through imagery. And I was really condemned, fed magazines من أمي, such as Vogue and L'Officiel and all of that. So بدون ما أحس, I was consuming design subconsciously. And to be honest, it was the only thing that I was good at. I was very bad at school. Yeah, that's just to let you know about that part of me.
So this was growing up. And so when you decided to join an academic institution, I know you went to Central St. Martin and then you went to the Royal College.
Royal College.
So how did you make the decision, like maybe a bit, how did you join? When did you join? How did you join?
Don't forget, I was growing up during the civil war in Lebanon, but ما عندي كان choice إلا ما أترك البلد. I had to leave Lebanon and find a way of going to London to study design because there was no design education in Beirut at that time. We're talking 1986. كان ما في وقت الديبارتمنت تبع ليلى بالAUB. I don't think LEU was running the design department necessarily at that time. I went to London and I applied. كمان أنا ما كان عندي basis of a portfolio. You have to have a portfolio when you submit to these schoolings in London. As you know, they're like the top schools. So I had to start with a foundation course at the London College of Printing to accumulate a portfolio. And then from that, I applied to Central St. Martin's. So I had enough body of work that put me on that platform. And I think already from that, it's my difference that people were attracted to. But لما قدمت على Central St. Martin's and قبلت, which was, I just couldn't believe it that I was accepted at the best art school in the world. And then from that, 3 years later, I decided to apply for a master's degree, which is where I started specializing in Arab pop. So it was at the Royal College is where they harnessed me into becoming an individual artist. And in the British system, they merge art and design together. They don't really separate it.
Yeah, that's also interesting to note. So you mentioned Arab pop. Can you tell us more about what you mean by Arab pop?
Arab pop, yeah, maybe I would consider myself a pioneer in that, humbly saying. So in my time, the imagery about the Middle East was very haphazardly done. It was done by amateurs exporting their culture abroad. There was no understanding of packaging or or retail design, or even designing of restaurants. Language at that time was the Shaabi, the things that you would find, the ephemeras on the streets, popular culture. And that was done by amateur artists, amateur designers that were not trained. But I always believe that they were visually communicating their culture without using necessarily the mind. It was very instinctive. And it had a lot of charm to it, and it was very, very authentic. I came in and I captured and I took all of those elements, and because of my education, I knew how to harness that and repackage it and make it accessible to a wider audience. So it's Shaabi, and that should not be dismissed at all. So I now call it Arab pop, and it's pop art. And I don't want to also think people to assume that it's pop art, yani Andy Warhol and all that cliche. It's the visual language of popular culture, how it's used and how it's amplified and how powerful it is in communication, and how mass communication. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I like the way you speak about authenticity when you describe pop. Whereas when we teach pop art, we speak about the authentic versus the copy. And, this is when we're recognizing the copy at the level of the authentic. So I know what you mean by authentic, as in, raw culture.
Absolutely, as raw. And yes, and not using the mind.
Yeah.
It's very, very instinctive. And that's the most beautiful design, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. Talking about this, can you tell us about one of maybe the latest TV show or movie or book that you've been influenced by?
That recently, actually, I haven't had a television for like a good 5 years. When I was living in Beirut, I did not watch TV. I was actually too busy designing and running my business. Now that I moved to Miami, I have a television here, and I watch a lot of YouTube videos. And what I've been interested in is watching how a lot of travelers come to the Middle East and document the Middle East through their eyes. And it's so interesting. It's all about perception. And the foreigners still capture the Middle East in a very mundane, cliche. Very, very few are out there doing something like that's really interesting and very authentic. So it's been very, very going back to school, going back to basics. How is the Middle East still documented or perceived? And people out there are still doing a lot of rubbish. Very few are doing very interesting to change people's perception about the Middle East. In terms of reading, I still have a lot of interesting books that I read. I have a soft spot for Paul Smith, so I read a lot of his books on how he thinks. So I have a book that I've been reading recently about him. I have a book by my bed all about chocolate. So things like that, the bizarre and wonderful, like the most unexpected. I'm not into really literature. Another book next to my bed is about the graphics of the Taliban.
Nice.
So it keeps my curiosity going. I do a lot of research still after my successful book, The Secret Life of Syrian Lingerie. I still accumulate a lot of information about sexuality in the Middle East. So I'm still reading and documenting.
I'm glad you mentioned going back. We're going to get back to The Secret Life of Syrian Lingerie. So you're talking about the representation of the Middle East, and I think you're one of those designers / pop artists who are very much interested in exploring identities or just this idea. What is the Middle East? How are we representing the Middle East today in our visual production? And so a lot of nostalgia in your work, and I feel that nostalgia is back. This is, I don't know, we go back to our past to represent ourselves.
The reason for that ingredient in my work is because also dipping back into the 50s is when Lebanon was at its peak in its design after the independence. So and that was when a lot of the architects were producing fantastic buildings. The city was at its peak financially. And then, of course, after that, the civil war.
So with independence, maybe we should be a bit more, explain more to our audience. The independence is the independence from
From the French mandate, yes. We were obviously, prior to that, influenced by French culture, and we became independent in 1948, and soon after, into the 50s, a lot of the Lebanese started to harness their own talent, a very proud Arab. So Arab nationalism was really like, we are here to explore and to glorify our own talent. So architecture was the peak at that period of celebrating Arab talent. Lots of Lebanese architects were coming from abroad, who were taught abroad, were building in Beirut, and doing their, creating their marks. There wasn't necessarily something called graphic design, but they were product design. When Khalil Khouri, he was producing lots of furniture. The father of Bernard Khouri. There was a lot of architects such as George Reyes, my father, Asim Salam, creating wonderful architecture that was obviously, with no doubt, influenced by Western culture. But modernism was coming into the city. And then much later, who was creating graphic design? The companies that, such as Bonjus, the local producers and Cortinas and all, they were the kind of producing graphic design in the market, but there was no really graphic design education. And of course, soon into the Civil War, the graphic designers were the militias, producing all these wonderful posters to express the different militia groups, the different logos, the posters that were created at that time. And a little bit of filmmaking was happening also during that period. So you would get all these wonderful cinema posters that were created that would go under the list of graphic design. And these really captured that wonderful moment that should not be forgotten. And I still use it into my work and to remind people of our history. And it plays on emotion. It's like you cannot sit and say, oh, let's destroy all of the old Beirut and let's start from scratch after the port explosion, for example. People start to renovate all the old properties and kept them, because you have to have a link of history somewhere.
Definitely. So you spoke about the influence of Beirut as a city on your work, but I also see in your work a lot of, the secret life of Syrian lingerie, Syria. Trips to Syria maybe influenced this, and also Egyptian influence, all these, the Egyptian divas and the golden days of movies, the production.
Yeah.
Maybe you can start a bit about the secret life of Syrian lingerie, the idea started, and the book, and maybe the thousands of copies that you've sold from
this. Yes.
A bit about how it was received by the audience.
If anything, the result of the book was because I was dipping into that region during my studies at the Royal College of Art. I would go a lot to Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon to collect ephemeras, and like an anthropologist, study the city through a designer's point of view. And when I would go to Syria, I would stumble upon those lingeries that were in the souks, and I would coming from art school, I was like, this is so crazy! Like, who the hell is designing these incredible lingerie with no notion of design background? Kinky. So I started to collect kinky and charming and naive and very creative, completely, and very homemade. It was not, it was very much ingredients from its own surroundings. So I started to meet the people that would produce them. And eventually we stumbled upon local photographers that would shoot these lingeries on Russian models that they would get from cabarets. And from all of that body of work, I was able enough to create a book that was a collection of a variety of people writing in the book, contributing. And it was just, and even commissioning photographers for the book that would document this whole experience. And not knowing that the book was going to become such a hit. But obviously now when I think about it, it was so provocative, the book, visually. And the title is enough to, was unheard of, even to the Syrians themselves.
it's breaking
Taboos.
types. Yeah, it's breaking stereotypes about the Middle East, of, you know, like being conservative. I mean, the Middle East is very complex in a way, and I think your work shows it in, you know, publishing a book on secret life of Syrian lingerie is a certain way of, you know, breaking all these ideas, mainstream ideas,
taboos,
images of the Middle East. Yeah.
Yes, but I did provoke a lot of people. Even Syrians themselves didn't even know that it existed in Damascus. So when I love doing that, as you know, with my work, I love provoking people because you know, art is a tool to make people wake up to reality of things. You know, and propaganda is very good at suppressing that. So that's why I always say there's a thin line between design and politics. So propaganda and media is very good at suppressing and changing people's perception in the way they want. And I'm gifted at telling people how things are on the ground. No makeup, no powder, no lipstick, no nothing. This is it. And I just put it in a book. And they were like, what? And I was like, what did I do? I just took what I found in the market and I put it in this book. I did not do anything else. And that made a big explosion. It's crazy. Like, and I realized how powerful the power that I had. You know, it's so bizarre that the minute this content is in a book, it can have a huge ripple effect. I was just a medium. I did not invent anything.
I think it's the circulation of the image that you've somehow triggered. You know, like it's something that is supposed to be hidden, but then it's not hidden anymore because it's all...
But it's not hidden in the market in Damascus. It's in people's face. That's what I'm saying. It's not that I found it hidden in the market and I took it. No, it's there. Just I think I now understand that I have the gift of the eye that people don't see. I am many times with my friends that they do not see the things that I do.
So if you had to tell us about the project that you most enjoyed working on, which project would it be?
Definitely the book was amazing, but I have 3 projects that really I was to die tomorrow, I'd be very happy. Is the wonderful opportunity that I had with Harvey Nichols, the fantastic opportunity that I had curating the exhibition in Dubai, brilliant Beirut. I was very honored that I was invited as a curator and a designer of that exhibit because I was able to illustrate the wealth of history of design in Lebanon from the 1950s to 2015. Nobody knew, again, about all of this wealth of information. And Harvey Nichols, it was just the beginning of this catalyst, doing things without realizing that I was exporting my culture abroad. And that was an amazing, amazing platform. It really made me think in a very different way and using retail and different platforms other than design galleries to express culture. So those 3 projects were like, wow, I would say my highlights.
So what is it about your work that you find most difficult now?
The most challenging, I've uprooted myself, as you know. The most challenging is that I'm back running things on my own. I used to have a design studio that I built. It was a dream. I had a team. I realized, you know, how much my team, without them, I would not be where I am. I'm back to being alone, working by myself. I brainstorm with still some of my colleagues. I have to admit, I'm a bit in a fragile state of mind where I used to depend on things. I used to depend on my physical structure of my design studio. I'm also understanding that the new generation relies on the digital world to express, that you just need your brain. The visual culture is on Instagram, it's on Facebook, it's on TikTok. It's no longer necessarily in a design studio that was in Beirut. So now if I'm meeting people in Miami, I immediately use my Instagram to express my portfolio. So it's a new way of stepping into expressing yourself. It's so powerful, but I do miss my design studio. Was a huge thing to me. But, you know, there's a notion also, people still expect things from me as a designer. What is Rana up to? What is Rana up to? They want to, you constantly have to deliver. It's like, it makes me think of, if you remember the singer Shaabi.
Yeah, of course.
And she was, and then she went very quiet for many years. And it happens to design. You're not a machine that's constantly creating. So there's a lot of pressure.
Definitely.
From the outside, like, I do get phone calls. What are you up to? What's your next project? So,
Well, this ties into my next question. That is, how do you see design? With the advancement of technology, ChatGPT, AI. Do you see it in 10, 20 years? That's not an easy.
I have to admit, it's amazing. It's amazing. As I do not feel that it has made graphic designers redundant. I embrace it. It is for designers to actually make their lives easier. And why not? Because when I sit and think of the amount of times I would spend on an InDesign document trying to create a layout from scratch, and it's already found on, say, Canva or on Adobe, better than what I would have done. And I would present it to my clients who would have, to be honest, they don't care. They don't need to know if it's done on AI or if I've done it from scratch on my InDesign document. What does it really matter? Now I can take a document that's already, the template is beautifully produced. I can buy it and sell it to my client to whatever price I want. The client doesn't know. They don't care. It's helping me. It's not a threat at all. I know a lot of copywriters are very threatened by ChatGPT. And I keep on saying, I constantly have this dynamic conversation with my friend who's an editor. And I say to her, Katya, use it. Use it. Your clients don't necessarily know if you wrote it or not. It's enhanced. It's making life quicker. Of course, nothing beats pen and paper. At the end of the day, we still take our notes and have ideas, but why not?
So what do you think about print media? Do you think that the end of print is near?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Yesterday, the exhibition that I went to was all about print and digital printing. No, it was an amazing experience. You still have to have the brand experience through physical presence and through touching a book, for sure. I still buy books.
Oh,
I mean, the ones who are really doing that very well is Asseline.
Asseline, yes.
Yeah, they have really come to a level where they've knew how to merge the visual strength of social media into a book. And they've expanded on books, on making it more than just books. They now produce retail, like candles, T-shirts. So it's all influencing each other. Digital work or the world influences real world. It's not, it's not amputated from each other. It's really like now. We are really living a visual culture now. Everything has to be really wow.
Yeah, lots of visuals. You're right.
I'll give you a quick example also about that reels are a big deal now on social media. So I used to be the old school where I would do all my reels on Premiere. And now you have apps that do them in 2 minutes. Like, what's wrong with that? And it doesn't make me less of a designer or less of an editor. So yes for apps and yes for saving time.
They're saving time.
And they're brilliant.
Of speed.
Yeah, if it helps me to communicate or relay an idea to somebody, why not? If ChatGPT is going to help me write or express myself even better to a client, why not?
So we need to wrap up. So do you have any, would you like to share with us a final word that you would like to leave us with today in this?
I want to just make sure that everybody, all your students are playing, not just, sitting behind their phones and or all these apps and whatever, but it's very important to be on the ground looking and out observing, and then bring all that information into technology. Not to be getting inspired from other reels or other platforms. Be on the ground. This is very, very important in design. I'd rather people are not brilliant at in design, but are brilliant at observation. To bring individuality, it's very important. By even what they eat, what they dress, what they consume, anything. Play, and be as authentic as you can be.
Thank you, Rana, for this wonderful discussion. See you soon in Beirut.
Yeah, I will see you very soon. Thank you.